Her name is Tomi. She is 89 years old. Every evening, she prepares the exact same plate she has been making for 60 years. She doesn't measure anything. She doesn't count a single calorie. She simply fills the plate in a very specific order. Vegetables go first, then a little bit of rice, then a small piece of fish placed near the edge, and she is finished in 4 minutes. Tomi has never suffered a heart attack. She has never been diagnosed with diabetes. Her blood pressure is normal. Her mind remains sharp, and she has no idea she has been following a longevity protocol her entire life. She is just eating the way her grandmother taught her. In this video, I am going to show you exactly how she builds that plate. It is adapted for foods you already buy at any supermarket starting tonight. You are going to get the 12 grocery items that make this work every week, the exact order the plate gets built, and the one thing that comes before the plate that most people skip, which is actually where most of the protection happens. Get a pen. This one is worth writing down. In 2009, researchers at Okinawa International University analyzed dietary surveys from more than 2,000 Okinawan elders. Nearly 3 decades of eating data. They expected to find something complicated, a specific superfood, a gene, a supplement. What they found was a plate. The traditional Okinawan plate runs 85% complex carbohydrates, 9% protein, 6% fat, the exact opposite of everything Western dietary advice has been pushing for the last 40 years. And the population eating that plate had 8 times fewer deaths from heart disease than Americans the same age, 7 times fewer from prostate cancer, 6.5 times fewer from breast cancer. Let that sit for a second. Not 10% fewer, not 20% fewer, 8 times fewer heart disease deaths. In a population that eats almost no red meat, almost no dairy, and almost no processed food, but also almost no protein powder, no supplements, no gym memberships, just a plate built a certain way every evening for decades. The researchers also found that the Okinawan elders were aging more slowly at the biological level. Their bodies were running younger than their actual age, not because of anything exotic, because of what was on the plate and how much of it was vegetables versus everything else. Nobody in Okinawa knew any of this. They were just eating the way their grandmothers cooked. Now, the obvious question, does this only work with Okinawan food? In 2016, a team at Lund University in Sweden answered that. They took 30 patients with type 2 diabetes, average age 57, most of them overweight, and adapted Okinawan plate principles entirely to standard European supermarket food. No Japanese markets. Nothing imported. 12 weeks. Blood sugar down 20%, body weight down 7%, blood pressure down nearly 10 points. And the blood sugar improvement showed up at week 2, before any meaningful weight loss had even happened. Think about what that means practically. The patients weren't eating less. They weren't exercising more. They changed the proportion on the plate, and the biology started moving in 2 weeks. The mechanism doesn't care what country the food came from. The proportion is what matters. And the proportion is something you can build on any plate tonight at no extra cost. But here's what I want you to understand before we get into the how. Because this is the part that usually gets lost when people try to copy a longevity diet. The Okinawans who produced these numbers were not trying to be healthy. They had no idea they were part of a longevity study. They weren't thinking about what percentage of the plate was protein or vegetables. They were just eating dinner, the same dinner their mothers made in the same order, with the same ingredients that grew nearby. The Chojuzen wasn't a protocol someone designed. It was just what the plate looked like, because that's what the plate had always looked like. That matters because it tells you something important about how the system works. It works because it's automatic. Nobody in Okinawa sits down at dinner and thinks about how much protein versus vegetables is on the plate. They just fill it in a certain order and eat. The structure does the work. The person doesn't have to. That's what we're building here. Not a new diet you have to manage. A plate structure that makes the right proportion the default. So you don't have to think about it either. So here's how you build it. The Okinawans call this plate the Choju Zen. It means longevity plate. And the whole system runs on one visual rule. Before anything else goes on the plate, before the protein, before the rice, the first half is already filled with vegetables and a sweet potato. That's it. That's the structural change that makes everything else automatic. When half the plate is already covered with sweet potato and spinach before you pick up the serving spoon for the chicken, you physically can't serve the portion of protein you'd normally serve. The plate does the math. You don't have to make a decision. No app, no scale, no willpower. Here's the order, step by step. First, sweet potato, a quarter of the plate. American orange sweet potato works exactly the same as the Okinawan purple variety. Same fiber, same slow energy release. Roast a batch on Sunday and reheat it through the week. 20 minutes in the oven costs almost nothing and removes a daily decision entirely. If sweet potato isn't in the house tonight, roasted carrots or butternut squash work exactly the same way. Second, a dark leafy green, another quarter of the plate, frozen spinach, frozen broccoli, kale, roasted carrots, whatever is already in your freezer. A fistful warmed in a pan with a little sesame oil and a pinch of salt. 3 minutes from frozen. If you have cabbage, that works too. The Okinawans eat a lot of cabbage, and it barely gets a mention in Western health circles, which is a shame because it's one of the cheapest, most practical vegetables in any supermarket. Now the plate is already half full, and you haven't made a single difficult decision. Third, a scoop of rice, about the size of your closed fist, smaller than you're probably used to. But remember, the sweet potato already covered a quarter of the plate. There's plenty of complex carbohydrate there. You're not restricting anything. You're just distributing it differently. Fourth, the protein, 3 to 4 oz, roughly the size of a deck of cards. Salmon, chicken, canned mackerel, whatever you already buy. It goes near the edge of the plate, not centered. One element among several, that's the choju zen, built with food from any supermarket, in less time than it takes to order takeout. Now, before you go making this complicated, I want to be very clear about something. You do not need to buy anything new this week to start. Look at what's already in your kitchen. If you have a sweet potato, a bag of frozen spinach, some rice, and any protein you normally eat, you have everything you need for tonight. The grocery list I'm going to give you at the end of this video is for the full weekly version. For tonight, just use what you have and build the plate in the right order. Now the mistake. This is the one that trips almost everyone. Most people, when they hear tofu, picture a big pale block replacing their chicken. That's understandable. It's how tofu gets sold in every Western supermarket. A full package, center of the plate, supposed to be the protein. They cook it plain. The texture is unfamiliar. After 2 or 3 tries, they give up and go back to what they know. But that's never how tofu appeared in the Okinawan data. In 60 years of Okinawan dietary records, tofu never sat at the center of the plate. It appeared as 2 or 3 small cubes in the miso soup, a few pieces mixed through a vegetable dish with sesame oil and cabbage. In any individual Okinawan meal, the total amount of tofu was what an American cook would call a garnish. That small amount in that position is exactly where the documented benefit comes from. The isoflavones in tofu are associated with dramatically lower rates of breast and prostate cancer in Okinawan populations compared to Westerners the same age. The research on this is consistent, and it goes back decades. But the protective dose isn't a full block of tofu served like a steak. It's a background ingredient present in most meals in small amounts doing its job quietly. You don't need a full block. You need the compound present in the amount it actually appeared across the data. The practical move. Next time you make any soup or any vegetable dish, drop 2 or 3 small cubes of firm tofu into the pot before serving. You're not replacing your protein. You're not making a tofu dish. You're adding one ingredient in a small quantity to something you're already making. That's it. That's what 60 years of Okinawan dietary records actually look like. Now, the element that comes before the plate, this is the one most people miss entirely. And honestly, it might be the most important part of the whole system. The Okinawans don't start with the solid plate. They start with a bowl of soup, a light miso broth, a tablespoon of miso paste dissolved in hot water with those 2 or 3 cubes of tofu served before the plate arrives. Not alongside it, before it, with a few minutes in between. This sounds almost too simple to matter. It's not. Here's what the gap does. When you start eating, your stomach begins signaling appetite regulation before it has processed the caloric content of what you're eating. The warm broth engages that system early. By the time the solid plate arrives, Appetite is already partially dialed down. Involuntarily, without any restriction, without any decision. You eat less from the plate because the biology is already running, not because you told yourself to eat less. Studies on pre-meal soup consumption consistently show meaningful reductions in total caloric intake from the following meal. Not because the person chose to eat less, but because the system was already engaged. The Okinawans didn't read those studies. They just learned from their grandmothers that dinner starts with a bowl of something warm. The 5-minute gap is where almost everyone loses this effect when they try to replicate it. They drink the broth alongside the meal sitting right there next to the plate. Or they finish the soup and immediately reach for the plate. The signaling effect disappears. The sequence is the mechanism. Not the soup alone, not the pause alone, but the combination. Miso paste is available at most large supermarkets, Asian food section, or refrigerated aisle. About $4 for a week's supply. A jar lasts 3 to 4 weeks. It dissolves in 30 seconds in hot water. If miso doesn't appeal, any warm vegetable broth without cream works the same way. Even a simple cup of hot water with a little salt and a piece of vegetable dissolved in it engages the sequence. The key, liquid first, a few minutes, then the solid plate. In that order, every time. So here's the full evening assembled. What this looks like on a normal Tuesday in a normal kitchen. You start the soup first before you even think about the plate. A tablespoon of miso paste in a mug of hot water, 2 or 3 cubes of firm tofu dropped in, 60 seconds. Then you sit with it somewhere comfortable. Not at the dinner table. The sofa is fine. The kitchen counter is fine. Just not in front of the plate that's about to arrive. 5 minutes, then the plate. Sweet potato on first, a quarter of the plate. Already roasted from Sunday's batch. Dark green vegetable next, another quarter. Frozen spinach warmed in a pan while the soup was steeping. A fist of rice. Your protein near the edge. You sit down, you eat. You're done in 20 minutes, that's it. That's the whole system. No tracking, no decisions, no willpower. The structure makes the choices for you. Here are the 12 items that make this work every week at any supermarket. No specialty stores, nothing imported, orange sweet potato, kale, frozen spinach, frozen broccoli, carrots, cabbage, frozen edamame. That's 7 vegetables. Add to that miso paste, firm tofu, sesame oil, rice, and 1 fish you already buy. Salmon, cod, canned mackerel, anything. That's your 12. A 4 lb bag of sweet potato runs under $3 at most supermarkets. The miso paste is $4 for a month's supply. The frozen vegetables are cheaper than fresh and work just as well. The total weekly cost of this system is not more than what you're already spending. In most cases, it's less. Most of those items are probably already in your kitchen right now. What happens when you run this consistently? In the first week, most people notice 2 things. 1, they feel lighter after dinner, not because they ate dramatically less by volume, but because the plate shifted toward more vegetables and less heavy food. The plate looks similar. The proportion is different. 2, they're less hungry before bed. The soup sequence did its job. Appetite ran a little lower through the evening without any conscious restriction. Some people in the first week also noticed the plate looked strange. Too much vegetable, not enough of what they're used to. That feeling passes. It's not a sign the system is wrong. It's a sign the previous plate structure was so ingrained it feels like normal, even when it isn't what the evidence points toward. Give it 10 days before you evaluate. At 30 days, the broth first habit is settled in. You stop thinking about it as a step. It just becomes how dinner starts. The Lund University participants showed measurable blood sugar improvement at 2 weeks before any significant weight change. The biology responds to the proportion quickly. The timeline is faster than most people expect. Something else happens around the 30-day mark that doesn't get mentioned enough. Grocery shopping gets simpler. You're buying the same 12 items every week. You're not searching for new things. The sweet potato batch goes in the oven on Sunday. The frozen spinach is always in the freezer. The miso paste lasts a month. The shopping trip gets shorter because the list stopped changing. At 90 days, you've stopped building the plate consciously. The sweet potato goes on first because that's just what you do. The rice portion is smaller because the plate is already half full by the time you reach for it. The soup is already on the stove because that's how dinner starts now. The system has become invisible, which is exactly how it worked for Tomi, and for the 2,000 Okinawan elders in the Wilcox study, and for every generation before them. They weren't following a protocol, they were just having dinner. One action this week. Tonight or tomorrow at your next main meal, put the vegetable and sweet potato on the plate first. Fill half the plate before the protein goes on. Don't change the protein. Don't change where you shop. Don't change what you spend. Just change what goes on first and let the proportion do the rest. And tell me in the comments right now, what takes up the most space on your dinner plate? The protein, the vegetables, or the starch? Drop it below. I read everyone, and your answer might shape the next video. Tomi never weighed her food, never tracked a macro. She just built the plate the same way every evening. Vegetables first, a little rice, a small piece of fish near the edge. She's 89, and the plate looks exactly the same as it did at 29. If this story changes the way you look at the simple ingredients in your kitchen, please subscribe and like the channel. We are uncovering the history and the science that they tried to bury. Let's plant the seeds for a healthier future. The next treasure of longevity will be revealed soon.